see, but we'll start. So this is the career planning website for those of you that don't know. So this is where, like, when I talk about the resume guide, this is where it is. So you go to sage.edu career planning. And then you go over here to resources for students. And this is like the holy grail. So here's all of our career guides. They were made by our awesome faculty. So there's stuff about being career ready, which is more for undergrad, but there's a bunch about networking, cover letter writing, resume writing, applying to grad school, which we already did, and then interviewing, which is also really helpful. So if you click on resume writing, we have this whole entire guide on resume writing. So that's where I pulled a lot of my PowerPoint information from, which I can send out too, but it literally has everything you need to know about writing a resume. And when I talk about action verbs, that's what this list is. And if you control F, there's PT examples in here. There's like probably one or two. So it's just really helpful to kind of like look where, like, these are all the examples. So then you can kind of see different ways to format it, because while there's a very strict way to do a resume, there's also a lot of variety. So that's where it gets kind of tricky. So that's the resume guide. There's one for cover letters too, which are not fun to write, but super, super important. And then you can sign up on Handshake too, which I don't think a lot of us are on, but that's how you make appointments with us. And that's the same thing as the beginning of the career page. So over here is Handshake, and you click on that, and then it takes you to Handshake. I made a profile on Handshake because I had to for my GA, and within 2 days, I got 2 offers to apply to a PT job. So it is actually legit, because when I was an undergrad here, I never did it, and then I started to. Okay, so I kind of took a lot of our resume PowerPoints that she's done for other classes and tailored it just to student PTs. So we're going to talk about applicant tracking system, the content of a resume, formatting of a resume, examples for PTs, and then I'm going to probably take 15 minutes to do this because I talk fast. And then if you want me to come around and like kind of look at your resumes, we can. I'm at my GA until 5, so we have time. So career planning service, this is what we all offer. And I know we talked about it during foundations, but that was like chaos. So we do resumes, cover letters. We help with job searching, interviewing tips. We do mock interviews. So if you feel nervous and you don't know what to expect at a job interview, we do them, and they'll tailor them towards physical therapy. So it's kind of helpful if you're a little nervous about it. We also have a career closet, which nobody uses, and it's not brand new clothes, but it's gently used professional attire. And you get an outfit a semester, but we have so much stuff that you could come take 2 outfits. But there's like blazers, there's dress pants. I got a pair of shoes for the presentation because I didn't have any ones that were appropriate. So it's actually not a bad resource at all. And there's tons of stuff in there, like really nice blazers. We do walk-ins whenever, and then you can set up appointments on Handshake. So this is like my quick tip for resumes that I tell everyone that I do resume appointments for. So get help from us, because resumes are really actually trickier than you think. And you hear a lot of stuff from outside sources, but the lady who trained me was like, researched everything. So she is awesome. So take what you want from this. You can do your own thing and be, it's just our suggestions, but this is like backed by like science. Use the resume guide, keep a running resume, which we'll talk about, work with your friends, and don't procrastinate, because it's really not fun to do a resume the day before you want to apply to a job. So applicant tracking systems. Has anybody heard of these? Okay, they're really scary. So it's like a computer system, and you put all your information in, and it provides like the job hiring source with applicants that are most applicable to what they're applying for. So it uses keywords to match candidates, which we'll talk about. And it's just designed to help like really big employees. And now this research is coming out saying even like mid-sized employees are using them. And these are examples of them. So it's like Indeed, when you apply to a job on Indeed, that's actually an applicant tracking system. So anytime you really apply to a job online and you don't just like send your resume, you have to fill stuff in, it's an applicant tracking system. And what's scary about it is only 25% of resumes make it to the face of a human. So if you're applying to like a big hospital or even like Albany Med, only 25% of resumes that are applied actually make it to a human person. So why? They reject resumes that have columns, colors, images, random headers, no keywords, and are more than one font and are in a template. So it's really important to use keywords that you find in the job description and match that to your resume. So if they keep talking about like efficient, fast-paced environment, and your resume doesn't have those words, you have a less likely chance of being picked. So that's why it's really important to match your resume to the job description and to keep it to one page, which I know is really difficult. So the content of resumes kind of goes with the applicant tracking system. Stuff to kind of leave out is references available upon request. It takes up a whole line, and we have so much stuff going into our resumes that we need every line we can get. Soft skills like language, or not language, like works well with others, or independent, or like responsible. Those are considered soft skills. Hard skills would be like language, computer, and stuff like that. And make sure you spell out everything except for like GPA and CPR, because what gets tricky with the medical field is you don't know who's reading your resume. So you don't know if it's a PT or a hiring manager that reads everybody's resumes at the hospital. So you got to kind of try to, so like a fine line between using PT language that highlights what your PT skills are, but also not using too much that you have no idea what the hiring manager wants. Required sections are going to be like education, most related experiences, and then those are other sections. But as a PT student, this is kind of like what I have for my running resume. You have your education. You're going to want to include your bachelor's and your doctorate. Once you've been practicing for over 4 years, you can put your education at the bottom because it's implied that if you've been a PT for 4 years, you have an education. Clinical rotations, which also gets tricky because we have a lot. Relevant experience, continuing eds, pro bonos, if they are applicable to the job you're applying to. Certifications, your APTA membership, your license, which I didn't include, and your capstone, which we all worked really hard on. And if it's something you're proud of, include it. College athletics and campus involvement are all other PT related like headings you can have. So the bullet, this is like that action verb thing that I talked about. It's on the resume guide, so you'll be able to see it better. So we want to start each bullet with a strong action verb. So like achieved, awarded, addressed, analyzed. You never want to use I statements like I worked with patients. The goal is about 3 to 4 bullets per experience. Again, it gets tricky when we're condensing them because I'll show you my example. I don't have bullets under everything. And then anything that is a current experience gets present tense. So achieve, work. Anything that's a past experience is going to be a past tense, worked, achieved, analyzed, and avoid responsible for and duties included. So here's an example of a student physical therapist. I underlined it in red, the action verbs kind of to explain a little better. So evaluated, because it's ended in 2018, and treated geriatric clients with, and then a bunch of PT things. So this is just an example of how we do our bullets. This is like what I was saying, like the hiring manager might not know what muscle energy techniques are, but we're PT students, we want to highlight that we do know what muscle energy techniques are. So that's where it gets kind of tricky, and it's really helpful if you know who you're applying to. So if you know you're applying to a small clinic and a PT is going to be reading it, it's way easier. When you're applying to Albany Med, you don't know who's reading it. So that's when it's kind of dicey. All of your formatted positions are going to go position title, organization, city, state, year. So everything in your resume should be really symmetrical. Like you should be able to step back, look at it, and it looks very like formal. So for example, graduate assistant, organization's career planning for Russell Sage College, Troy, New York, September 2021 to present. Gets a little different with like CPR. You want to know who gave you the CPR certification. You want to know when the CPR certification was and kind of when it expires. For us, we're going to keep it to present because we're going to keep renewing it. And then what are you? You're a member for who, the APTA, when. So it's kind of like a who, what, when, where. And then the whys are the bullets. So skills, we don't want any soft skills, like I said, communication, leadership, teamwork, but computer skills we want to have. So like Microsoft, Google Docs, any electronic medical records you've used during clinical, like Epic, those can be included. SPSS can be included, but only include them if you're actually able to use them. Because if you put SPSS and they ask you to do SPSS and you haven't done it since your second year of college, then it's not legit. And language skills. So like foreign languages. So this is my example for my resume. So my language is basic Spanish, basic pediatric-based knowledge of ASL, computer, I'm proficient in Google Docs, Google Slides, Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, and Epic Systems, which is the EMR I use during clinical. You can put like Google Suites and or Suites or whatever, and then Microsoft Suites if you don't want to list them all out. But that's the skills. Any questions so far? Okay. So this is formatting. This is the fun part, I think. So your margin should be between 0.5 to 1 inch. Again, you have to keep in mind the applicant tracking system. So if you have like a crazy margins or they're all over the place, it doesn't A, look pretty, and B, the applicant tracking system gets confused because it's super smart, but also not very smart. The font should be the same size except for your name, which can be a little bit bigger. Everything should be black. And those are like the generally accepted fonts by the applicant tracking system. So something calibrate is what I use because it's the smallest out of a lot of them. So you kind of play around with it to fit. And then spacing, single space throughout. So the first thing I do when I get a resume is make sure it's all single spaced. I make sure the margins are all good because I can't handle looking at a messy thing. I have to format it first and then edit it. And one page. So one page. This is like a huge debate I have with everybody. Again, you can take my advice or you cannot, but an employer only looks at your resume for 7 seconds. 7 to 10 seconds, they look at it, they see what they want, and then they put it away. So that's why your most important stuff goes up top, like your education and clinicals. They're going to go up top because that's going to catch their eye first. So you can use 2 pages, but the chances that they flip it over are very slim. So this is when it gets difficult because we have a lot of experience and you're going to want to highlight all of the awesome stuff, but you have to pick which is most important and most relevant and match the job description. So not all experiences need bullets, which we'll talk about, and then meet with career planning or send me your resume when I'm there and we can work on adjusting it so it all fits one page. That's probably the trickiest part that you guys are going to have problems with is because we have so much stuff. So formatting, like I said, that's my resume and you can like step back and you see it's super symmetrical. Everything looks organized. There's nothing like really sticking out in a weird way. Reverse chronological order. So your most recent stuff goes first and then you work your way down. Whatever you've been at the longest, if they're both current, goes first too. Because again, we're trying to highlight what you're doing now. No high school, which at this point, nobody should have high school on there, but no high school. Black bullets, there is some research saying that applicant tracking systems only like circle bullets. Some say that square is better. I always just tell people circle. Pay attention to detail. And this is where like when you come or like when I look at a resume, it gets super nitpicky and it's things that nobody picks up on is you can put periods at the end of your bullet statements. But if you do that, make sure every single bullet has a period. And then like, this is super nitpicky, but it's a thing. Between here, there's like no space. And then between this one, there's a space. And it's just stuff that if you're between 3 candidates and you're a hiring manager, you see that one person really took the time to pay attention to detail and the other one kind of didn't look at it as well. I personally do this because usually the stuff runs off the line and that drives me like crazy, even though it's fine. So I usually keep it condensed and make sure your P is capital. Some people put to current, but I've only really seen it with to present. I don't, to current kind of bothers me. I don't know why, it just sounds weird. So I always put present. Good question. So running resumes, this is my biggest recommendation. And I tell everybody, you just should have a running resume. So I know for the program, we do 1 page, but that's fine to submit and that's what you put for a job, but you really should just start a running resume. If you have a resume now that you're kind of going, oh my God, keep that as your running resume and then start a fresh one and pull off of that. It makes applying to a job so much easier. And you don't need to like sit back and think about what you did 5 years ago. It's already there. It doesn't need to be complete or perfect. There's no page limit and nobody really looks at it. So it's a great resource to have. So then when you decide to change to a different PT job in 3 years, you don't have to go back and think about all the pro bonos you did. You have them all listed. So this is my running resume. It's 3 pages long and you can see it's chaotic. There's like random blanks, there's highlight. Like I have students come in and do volunteer stuff and I realized I did it 4 years ago. So it's just that way when you go to apply for a job and you see they did a volunteer thing with a regional food bank 3 years ago, or that you did it and they did too. Maybe that's something I want to put on there that shows that I volunteer there too. Like you're trying to make yourself the most marketable towards a job. And if you already have all the reasons you're marketable and like all the stuff that you've done, it makes it so much easier. And we've done a lot. You don't want to forget anything. That's awesome. So examples of PT stuff, really small. This is my running. So I took my running resume and then I applied to a clinical. It was only pediatrics. So I did only pediatric. I highlighted my pediatric experiences. So if you can't see it, I have my education up top because that's what goes first. I have the doctor of PT. You can put anticipated or expected, or you can leave it out. It's up to you what you want to do. It's already like assumed that if it says May 2023, it's anticipated. And then I have my degree from my bachelor's with my minor. Then I have clinical experience. So I did this summer before full-time. So I have part-time. And I did all my little bullets and then my observation hours, which now will be removed because I have clinical experiences. So they're not as relevant. Just like one day when you're like a practicing PT for 10 years, you're really not going to have as many clinicals anymore because you have relevant job experience. So everything kind of gets moved away. And that's why having a running resume is great because you just leave it on there. So then you still have it one day. I have my membership in a professional association. And if I was licensed, I put my license after. Then I did relevant childcare experience because I'm applying to a pediatric job or a pediatric clinical. So I wanted to highlight that I already have experience with kids. It's not PT related, but it's experience with kids. So then I put bullets under there. But this is what I was talking about with, maybe I made it. Oh yeah, I did. This is what I was talking about with, you don't have to have bullets under everything. I did additional work experience because I wanted to highlight that I was working in college. Like I worked all the way through grad school. Like that's something I wanted to highlight, and that I was an AP lab teaching assistant, because again, that just shows another leadership skill. But you don't need bullets as long as the section is consistent. So the biggest thing is keeping consistency. And then I have lacrosse, certifications and trainings, which we looked at, and same with skills. So this is old. My new one has like my full-time clinical, it has my capstone on it. So this is again observation hours, but this is kind of how you like do bullets for PT. So you talk about what you did. So like I observed McKenzie method treatment, which I didn't see at my other clinical. So it's something I wanted to highlight that I did during observation hours. Learned basic interviewing techniques through observation of evaluations and examinations. Engaged in observational learning over the course of several months to learn the basics of how a clinic and treatment session run. So when I work with a student talking about bullets, a lot of people come in with learned basic interviewing techniques. How would you do it? Why did you do it? Where did you do it? So kind of trying to expand it so it's a bigger bullet. Does that make sense? Like you want to kind of like emphasize it, like go over the hump of why you did it. So again, this was part-time clinical for Center for Disability Services. Assisted in a hydrotherapy in pool for children with increased muscle tone and spasticity. And then like perform transfers to and from varying surfaces. So that's what I had originally. And I was trying to think about like, what else did I do? Including gait trainers, Ripton equipment for gait training. So kind of throwing in like equipment names that you worked with that site might work with is another good thing to do. Any questions on those two? That's my spiel. So that's when I GA. So you can email us your resumes if you have questions and you don't want to like make an appointment. I know we're all busy, so you can email it to the career planning website, or you can walk in whenever. Any questions? Comments? Well, Carrington, you're a very special case because you're a veteran. Yeah.
For walk-ins, do you sit down and like actually work on the resume, or you just like I didn't bring in a full resume to you?
No, we can sit down and work on it.
Can I have some questions that I get from advisees?
Yeah.
So the first one is, should you include your GPA?
If it's above a 3.5 for science, yeah.
Okay. Second question. What do you do if you're applying to a job or clinical that's outside of the area? Do you put your local address? That would be like where you're living right then, or do you put the address that you'd like to be in when you apply, or you're working in the new area? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always just put my home address. I think I was told to put within the license. We also would, what's new is we don't include the city street anymore. We just do the city, or we don't include like 77 wherever I live. You just city state. I don't think it makes that much of a difference.
Okay.
I haven't heard research on that. That would make that much of a difference. Any other questions? Yeah.
Are you using a personal email instead of your school email?
For
Just like we're going to be leaving. So.
no, I use my school one. If you have any questions, you can email them there. I also careerplanning.sage.edu is like.
Oh, I meant on your resume.
Oh, on my resume, I'm doing my Sage one until I lose that. Yeah, so we recommend, good question. We recommend using your Sage one or a professional personal email. So if your Gmail is like super silly from when you're 5, don't use that. Maybe make a professional one. And don't have it hyperlinked. So if it's like blue and underscored, that gets dissed by applicant tracking systems too, and it just looks bad. Yeah.
How important is it to, I guess maybe for like 3 students, but how important is it to have your bachelor's degree on there? Because I see Like it might take up some space.
Yeah,
Push them aside. Do you have to have it up?
we recommend it.
Or like your associate, you got an associate. For that.
Usually, what I was told is you keep the top 2 degrees. So if you have an associate, the bachelor's and a doctorate, bachelor's and associate, or and doctorate would go. Well, do you still have your bachelor's on there too?
Not anymore.
So eventually you can remove it. If you really don't want to talk about where you went to undergrad, then you don't have to, but recommended. That's why I have mine stacked like this.
Yeah.
To save room.
I was just thinking like at this level. I mean.
It's assumed you'd have a bachelor's degree. And Right, and if your bachelor's degree is from like 10 years ago, then maybe it's not as relevant.
Yeah, I don't know if I should say this off recorded, but I would say if you had a gap or a career change or something like that, putting your previous education can be helpful to show how you arrived where you are. So if you are maybe like a non-traditional student, or you got a different degree in something unrelated and then don't have work experience because you're taking prereqs and going back to school, I would put all that on there so you can show what you were doing with your time.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good thing to talk about. Will?
If we want to start applying before we graduate, and we want to highlight our GPA
Yep.
from that, is that appropriate to do, or should we wait or just leave that off?
No, you can leave it and you just update it as you go.
And Jen, then just write in progress or graduate, expected graduation, or how should you work that?
So I don't put anticipated May 2023 because I just don't like it, but people do. It's a preference. So it's assumed that I graduate in May 2023 and it's anticipated. But a lot of people do put anticipated or expected because it makes them feel like they're covering all their boundaries. Like I don't have my degree yet, it's anticipated. So either way, you're right. And you can put your GPA. There's an example in the running resume guide of how to word your GPA. You just throw it underneath where it says Russell Sage College. You would just put GPA 3.5. And I don't usually have people put it under their bachelor's degree unless you want to. Like if you had a really good bachelor's degree, GPA, you put. Any other questions? Yeah.
How far back was this for you?
Yeah. So that's where it gets tricky. I recommend whatever you think really highlights your skills as a physical therapist. So you might not think working at McDonald's highlights your PT skills, but it shows you can work in a fast-paced environment. It shows that you know how to work as a team. So if you're looking at your resume and you're looking at the job description, you kind of feel like you're missing a gap, go back to your running resume and see, what am I missing? So it's up to you. If you feel like it's something you really want to talk about in your interview, leave a comment on that at all. That's where it gets like I said, it gets dicey. So that's why having a running resume is super helpful. Then you can go back and pull. Like I worked at a restaurant in high school and I haven't put that on my resume in like 5 years. But if you have job, as long as you have enough positions to highlight every aspect of you and your skills as a PT and what you want to highlight. Like if you don't like fast-paced environments, then don't put anything on there that's a fast-paced environment. Like if you want to be at a clinic that is smaller and slower paced and you like slower paced. Do you know what I mean? You're trying to match yourself the best way and being honest the best way to a job description. You're not trying to like make yourself sound way better than what you're capable of. Not to put it like
Can I
that.
say something about that?
Yeah.
As I've done a number of interviews of new grads and just people in general, you put something on your resume, be prepared to talk about it. So if you put that you're planning on taking this certification, and then I ask you why you're taking that certification or what you think it's going to do for your career, you should have an answer. So if you're like, oh no, I just, thought it was good to have more letters. It's like, maybe it should have been left off your resume because it doesn't really add to you as a candidate. So
Right.
Same thing if you talk about your capstone and I ask you a question, like be prepared to have the elevator speech about your capstone.
Right. Right. And that's why does this one have it? So this one, I just put additional work experience because I didn't put bullets because I didn't have room for one page. But I also wanted to highlight that I was a graduate assistant. Like that's 10 hours a week for the past since 2021 of September that I've done that while I'm a graduate student. Like it highlights that aspect of what I am. If I don't like my GA, I'm not going to put it. If I didn't like my experience working for this boss and I don't want them to ever ask me about it, I'm not going to put that on my resume. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Yeah.
So I met with somebody in your
Uh-huh.
department and they told me that under the continuing education section to put down all of my med bridge courses. And I did it because they said to do it, but I feel like it's not a really great use of space.
I agree. We've done a lot. I think, again, looking at the job you're applying to, if you're applying to a very specific like pediatric job and you took a pediatric med bridge and you can talk about it and remember what you learned, then put it. But yeah, exactly. I don't have any med bridges on my resume because I haven't like felt like that. Does that make sense? But if I took if I'm applying to a job for like pediatrics and I take a med bridge on pediatrics and I like actually feel like I can talk confidently about that med
Yeah.
bridge,
Okay.
I would. Or if it's one that like you're looking at like recommended things for the PT to have and they want like the geriatric training that we did, put that on there.
Okay.
As long as you can talk about it, like Dr. Salvatore said. Because when I get students in for resume appointments and I ask them about it and they're like, I have no idea, then I'm like, you have to delete it. Because you're gonna get asked about it.
Okay.
But same with like if you've done any like the rock tape courses or anything like that, that definitely goes on there.
Would you put the LSVT on like ahead of time? No.
I would put like that, I would put anticipated.
Anticipated.
Yeah, I would put anticipated May 2023. Or whenever I feel like I'm gonna, like whenever
Just
it's the due.
describe that, like what you do, what you were expecting to do in that course, or you just say anticipate and leave it at that?
I'd leave it at that. I don't know, do you put like bullets underneath your courses that you've done?
Not usually.
Yeah, because it's like a certification, it's expected what you did at it.
So for you guys, for LSVT, I might put like LSVT training completed December 2022, like certification May 2023, something like that.
Yeah.
Just to like clarify that it's already done, that you guys have the knowledge, because that's really interesting.
Right, exactly. It's a really good thing to highlight. Like you want to like look back at what you've done and the fears of the program. What are you proud of? What can you talk to an employer about and be proud of? And how do I highlight myself? How do I make myself stand out from the 30 other PTs that are applying to this job? Like if you did something really cool and it was not during PT school, you can still have it because that's really cool. It's going to highlight you in a different way.
But if you did complete a certification, then describe that.
You don't have to.
No.
No, because they can look up, they would probably know what the course is and be able to. That's something you talk about in your interview though. So like when you're prepping for your interviews, think about why you took that course, what makes it meaningful, how do you want to talk about that with an employer?
Okay, so I'm kind of kicking myself for not doing that rock tape like certification.
Yeah.
And because now I'm like, well, I want to build my resume and make myself more marketable. How do we go about finding those types of things in this area? Like, what's the best way to go about that? Instead of just waiting for like the LGBT thing to just fall into our laps, basically.
That's a loaded question. It's a good question. So there's a few, so first of all, you can spend any amount of money on continuing ed, and after you guys get licensed, your mailbox can be inundated with like 2 or 3 flyers every day of continuing ed courses. It's really important to look at quality over quantity, because you can take some really insane courses for like insane amounts of money and they're just not worth it. But I'm taking 2 of them, so I can tell you that. I would say in this area, Northeast Seminars and PEFI offer pretty good bang for, I mean, they're expensive seminars, but they're worth it. They're good. Northeast does like the Mulligan method. It does a lot of like manual therapy stuff. Use Northeast Seminars and PESI, which is like a rehab continuing ed company. PESI does offer like rock tape, and I took rock tape through them, and I took rock blades through them, and I took blood flow restriction training through them, but they have all sorts of other stuff. And you can't do blood flow restriction in New York, so what waste my time, but those would be a few. Then I would start looking at like what are some big name ones. So like Mackenzie is, I think A and B are well worth it for every direct access outpatient provider. I think if you want to go past that, that's a choice you can make, but A and B are good courses. Maitland is another good one. You can find a Maitland course. And then Grafton, you've got all like your manual therapy techniques. You could do something like if you're looking for specialty practice, you can go through. You can probably look at the APTA's like special interest groups and see what everybody's doing there. But so like I know Herman Wallace has pelvic floor. That's a big name. I would say if it is a pamphlet that comes in your mail and it looks like a random seminar, I've never taken one of those that I've been happy and spent money. I've taken a number of them. Sometimes you just need CEUs, but you really want to vet your choices. So it's not that easy short answer.
Yeah.
If you wanna make sure it's accredited, make sure that, it counts for the state you're in, because some of them require certification through the state, like New York. It'll say for New York, this is a continuing education provider for New York. And so like on PSI, which is I think what I sent you in an email, Carrington, it will say at the bottom of the course description, if it's approved for CEUs in New York, and usually it'll have like a bunch of other ones, but those are things you wanna look at, I think, before you take them.
I think it's also important to remember too, that they don't expect you to have all of this stuff coming out of school. Like, as a hiring manager, they know you're a PT student and your last 6 years, 3 years, whatever it is, has been school. Like, it's okay to not have, you're not going to be the best PT version of you yet. So like, don't get hung up on not having continuing eds, don't get hung up on all that, because once you start to condense your resume to one page, like this was impossible for me to do. And this was before we went to clinical. This was a lot of work, and I worked with my boss at career planning and Dr. Ayosa, and it took a lot of condensing. So like, and that, I don't even have like LSVT, I don't even have my clinicals on there. Like condensing to one page is really, really tricky. So don't be hung up on that yet.
I would also say, like, I care most when I'm interviewing somebody about seeing like their initiative and willingness to learn and their willingness to like care about the people on the teams they've worked with. So it's not really about who's the most credentialed. It's just, if you took LSVT, that shows me that you've got, you know, some initiative in terms of learning, and you've probably got some interest in like, you know, furthering your education.
Right.
That's why that's valuable. I mean, it might also be valuable to the clinic because we want somebody to do LSVT, but really it shows that you are somebody who's not going to just like sit back and not review anything again for 20 years.
I agree. There's also things about summary statements and including those, or like objectives. I personally don't, because it takes up room and they know you want to be a PT. That's kind of what I say. Like, I never put an objective on my resume, and I never put a summary statement.
Would you suggest putting that in a cover letter?
Yes, so thank you. That's why we do cover letters, which are a whole nother fun thing. But the cover letter, I'll show you, because it walks you through how to do a cover letter like this does, which is where under the resources for students. Where is it? Yeah, so it literally walks you through how to do a cover letter. It gives you examples and it gives you phrases to use. Yeah, you literally fill in the blank. And it's a really great resource. Obviously, if everyone from Sage applies and we all have the same cover letter, they're going to know that we copied this cover letter. But this is like the first couple times you write one, it's really awkward and uncomfortable. Like, I got trained in resume writing in like 3 months. Cover letters took me like 4 or 5 months to figure out. But they're super important, and good point. You should really always send a cover letter with your resume. You should also always send a follow-up thank you within 48 hours of your job interview, unless you didn't feel like you were a good fit, then don't. But it's like, I think 5% of student or people who interview, only 5% send a thank you letter, and that makes you stand out. Especially if there's an applicant tracking system, makes you stand out a little bit more too.
What would that entail?
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's just like a super simple like email to them, just saying like, hey, I really appreciated your time for the interview. I'm really interested in this position. I look forward to hearing from you soon. It's really simple, just a thank you. Hey, I exist. Remember, you interviewed me. It makes you stand out a lot.
I would also say my advice on that is pay attention to who's interviewing you. Write their names down right when they introduce themselves, like take notes at your interview. And make sure you send your thank you to all the people on the interview.
Yeah, so I just pulled it up, post interview, write down the name, so good job. And it says within 24 hours. That's our recommendation, I guess. I thought it was 48 and 25%, not 5. So that's a little better than we thought. But this is our interviewing guide. So it has a lot of questions and answers about how to answer, like, what's your greatest strength, what's your greatest weakness.
Don't say perfection.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things, and there's like different methods. The lady who put this together was Amanda Shaw, and she did she was from undergrad, if anybody remembers her. She was awesome. And so she takes a lot of time to research things. She's no longer with us, sadly, but she moved. Thank you notes. So they have an example right here. Yeah, I know. I realized it sounded like she died. Woo, I realized it sounded like she died. So here's an example for you. And that's the interviewing guide. So it's under the resources for students. If there's anything I'd write down from this, it's the resources for students on career planning. Any other questions? Those are good. Feel like it helped.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's very well done. Yeah.
Thank you.